So I wanted to ask you, what was your school like when you were growing up?
Well, that's sort of a there's a lot of answers to that because the reason we're here is the topic of desegregation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in the southeast Arkansas in what we call the Delta, the Mississippi River Delta. And so when I started school in all of grade school, I went to a school that was, of course, all white, and it was just a nice elementary school, probably 35, 40 people in my class. Yeah, I mean, it was just, I grew up about 5 blocks from the school, and so walked to school a lot, rode my bicycle a lot, and when I could talk my older brothers and sisters into picking me up, I could ride with them.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it was fine. It changed a lot after that, and but still, small town, 4,000 probably population, Mississippi River Delta, Jim Crow laws, very different lifestyles between black and white. But anyway, we can get into that later. But
Yeah, I remember learning about Board versus the Brown of Education being in 1955, which then I realized that was the year you were born, but your stories of desegregation, you were much older. And that realization of the gap really surprised me. Because then, of course, learning in school, I think, that's when the court case happened. So then everything changed. But that's not how it went down from the stories I heard from you. So I'd love to hear more about when desegregation did happen and when you started becoming aware that was coming. Because, again, it was a long time between the legal cases that I learned about and when you experienced it yourself. So, tell me about when that started.
Yeah. Well, it is funny when I learned later about when things are supposed to happen and laws are passed, but people don't always do. And in the South, desegregation was not popular among the whites. And from what I understand, even a lot of the black population wasn't sure because it was basically, in some places, and I don't know if it's true in my hometown, but some of the black schools were very good schools, excellent schools. So it was like, wait a minute, there's going to be some loss from that point of view. But anyway, in my experience, I'll just, 6th grade, right? These two beautiful little black girls showed up in my 6th grade class. I had no idea why. All I know is that in the 6th grade, I was looking forward to the field trip that we always did, which was going to over to Monticello to the college because they had an indoor swimming pool with a high dive. And I couldn't wait to get there and show off because I was a pretty good diver. And that was canceled because now I know, they didn't tell us outright, but it was because they didn't want to deal with having these 2 African-American children in our class go into a swimming pool with white kids. So that was the first thing in school that I noticed. Then 10th grade. So 10th grade, not much changed. 10th grade, I guess do you want to get into all that? Because 10th grade is when we had true desegregation.
Yeah. So I guess there was a small amount of desegregation
It was
before?
called school choice.
Okay.
And I can't imagine the courage of those black families. Sorry, I don't know. Can we stop for a minute? So, I mean, the families that got their children ready to go to this all-white school, I'm sure it took a lot of courage, and those children, I have really thought about them a lot because I'm sure it took a lot of courage. I mean, it's the middle of Jim Crow. It's absolutely a Jim Crow culture there, whole plantation system and all that. And that must have taken a lot of courage for them to do that. Anyway, so 10th grade, though, was the year the federal government basically, this was 1970. I guess at that point, the federal government had pretty much said, hey, you desegregate or your funds are drying up. So, and, I'm telling you, I felt like I was fairly aware as a, that age child. I mean, I read a lot of, I read a lot, and I kind of halfway knew what was going on. But just from my perspective, I left school in the 9th grade. In the 10th grade, I went expecting school to just be another year, and all of a sudden, my class went from 40 white kids, pretty much, with, like I said, maybe the 2 or 3 African American children, to twice that size, all black children. And so we went from a class being 40 or 45 to 90 to 100, and that increase was all black kids. And it was a shock. I had no idea. I didn't really realize what was happening. And our classes were bigger. It was the culture was different. I don't know. It was a shock to me.
What do you mean by the culture was different?
Well, because we started having conversations, right? I'm just going to use one example because this is the one I always think of because, I was really into sports. One day, we were sitting around talking, a few white guys, a few black guys. We started talking about our baseball teams. And the subject came up, well, y'all had baseball? Yeah, we had baseball. Well, we said, well, where were y'all? I mean, where was your field? We didn't even know where their field was. And I'm talking, this is the same 4,000 population town. And as we got to talking, we were saying, yeah, well, we really did pretty well, except we didn't have any pitchers. And they were like, well, we had a couple of really good pitchers. Theotis was a great pitcher, and so was he. But our hitting was terrible. Anyway, as just kids that cared more about sports probably than anything else at that point, we were like, crap, we could have been a lot better baseball team if we had been together. We didn't realize that. And I just remember thinking, this keeping us separate. At that point, that was a price that I considered a pretty high price. My baseball team could have been better if we hadn't have been so separated. Anyway, as a child, but it wasn't just that. It was that these guys lived in homes that were way different than most of our homes. I'm not saying there weren't poor white kids too, but as a group, most of the black kids came from very poor situations, and their clothes weren't quite as nice. It's hard to tell some of these stories. I don't know if I should even, but one. Emotionally, I'm going to tell this, and I had a track coach. he was my neighbor, a wonderful man. And he heard some of the white guys talking or something, but I don't remember the context. But I just remember him coming out after track practice one night. We were in the locker room. We were just messing around before we went home. And there was one of the black guys was a great runner. In fact, he was very good, and he was a couple of years older than me, but we had been talking, and I'm sure something derogatory came out because we were a bunch of white kids there. And he came out and he said, I want you to know something. And I won't call his name, but he said, so-and-so has no way of cleaning his clothes. And once a week, I make him bring all his clothes. And I take them home and wash them. And I'll never forget that because, it's nothing like my life. My mom washed my clothes every day because I just threw stuff down, But there was a huge difference in that. It was hard to realize that these guys grew up blocks away from us. So it's such a different world. But it's not because they told us. It was just in our regular interaction. They were just kids, and we were kids. And we learned a lot from each other. I did anyway. But, yeah, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, so you mentioned you learned a lot. How did you see those lessons as you moved on, as you moved into adulthood? Seeing the impact of those lessons from desegregation?
Well, it opens your eyes about your world. It opens your eyes about the larger world, right? Because you start to see, even in school, you were seeing teachers that were compassionate for the children, regardless of black or white, and you saw teachers who were obviously not. It was a big lesson for me when I'll tell this story as quick as this. I could talk about this all day, but I just by grace I sat next to a black guy named I'm going to call his name because people would know him, named D.C. Washington, and in physics class we sat next to each other. I call him D. His dad had just died not long before this, but D's a very outgoing. He didn't have any border or any boundaries. Because I sat next to him, he was going to be my friend, whether I wanted him to or not. Anyway, I know now he was struggling with the loss of his dad, and he was pretty religious. So eventually we got to be friends, and I don't know how this happened, but we decided it would be a good idea for him to go to church with me. And I'm very sure that he was the first black face in any white church in McGee, Arkansas, ever. And I don't know if it's changed much since, but anyway. So we go to church, and small town is so hilarious, but for the next month, this church was in uproar. Dad was faced with, he was a deacon in the church, and he was faced with, how could you let your son, blah, blah, blah. Well, for a month, I don't know, maybe even the bigger community was in uproar, but nobody told us. So me and Dee became our friendship. So after about a month or two, I said, why don't you come on and go back to church with me? Well, at this point, we sat down, and actually a few people walked by us leaving. One man saying something ugly and using the N-word and all that. And actually, the past preacher of that church asked me not to bring him back, which was when I began to learn that, wow, this place of tradition and safety isn't as safe as I thought it was. Now, I'll tell you a place that was safe. My home. your grandparents. DC calls them his heroes. Because I have no idea what kind of flack they took. But they opened up our home to black kids. And, I had no clue that it was not normal to invite them in, to come over. And anyway, it really changed a lot. And I will say this too: my friends, my white friends, stayed my white friends. They were, I don't know why, because there were times when I definitely made stands that weren't popular with the white kids, but I never lost friends. So I can't say that personally I paid much of a price as a child. I mean, I don't know. My parents probably protected me a lot.
What kind of stands did you have to take?
Okay, one story. This is crazy, but we had class elections, right? Uh-huh. No, I'm not going to tell that one. Yeah, I will, because the other ones I'm not ready. We had class elections. Well, remember, my class at this point was 50-50, probably about black-white. Well, obviously, black kids are going to, at this point, black kids are going to vote for black kids, white kids are going to vote for white kids. You would think that if somebody was thinking and wanted to teach how to be fair, we would do something like, write the names down on a piece of paper and, let's have, but no, we were in the cafeteria and you stood up to vote. Well, at one point, the whole injustice, I don't know if it's injustice, but it's just a ridiculous situation because it was always white kids are voting for a white kid, blah, blah, blah. And I just got tired of that situation. There was a black kid up for some class. I don't even remember what it was, what the position was or whatever, class treasurer or whatever. And I just thought, I've had enough of this. So I voted for the black kid. I stood up for the black kid. And I guess the reason I know it made such an impression because, of course, I was at a table with all my white friends, and they were like, Horan. They called us Horan there, not Horan, but Horan, sit down, sit down, sit down. And I was like, which made me all the more, it's that little bit of radicalness, radical behavior that we see in our family. But it just made me all the more determined, I guess, to just, and I don't even remember the kid or whatever. I just remember thinking, I'm going to stand, I'm going to make a stand here. And I voted for it, and so I did. Now, I'm probably, nobody in the world remembers that, but I do, because it was a really important time maybe for me in my development. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about the impacts of hearing your stories of desegregation. And now I'm going to get teary too, but I never knew what a gift that was to have heard some of that history. Yeah. Really until the race riots of the pandemic and a lot of my friends started sharing about their awareness and just hearing how different my experience was because I grew up with an awareness of the past and the experiences of desegregating and schools and church and personal life and homes. And I remember being at a track meet And the school we were at, their mascot was the Rebels, and there was a little caricature of Robert E. Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being really disturbed by that.
Really?
Yeah, and I was just like, how are these African American students able to wear that uniform that says Rebels across their chest?
Yeah.
And then just a few years ago, a friend he went to a college here in Nashville, Belmont, and their mascot used to be the Rebels, a Christian college.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's like, I didn't even think about it. And I was like, how did you not see that?
Yeah.
How did you not think about it? But it helped me appreciate the awareness I gained when I was younger from your stories. It helped me see my present experience with an appreciation of the past more clear,
Yeah.
I guess.
Good.
And I always appreciated it, but I think definitely hearing other people's delay in coming to that and understanding it really helped me treasure your stories. And it helped me see, even in my own experience of, I remember in elementary school, there was a pool, and it was the black pool, and only black kids swam in that pool, even when I was a kid. And I think I had more of awareness of where people lived in town and some of the segregation that persisted.
Yeah.
Even though our school was desegregated, this pool was like on the way to school. You know, I could still see segregation on my way to my desegregated school. So I don't know if I would have noticed. I can't say because, but I don't know if I would have noticed as clearly from such a young age without the stories of what you went through. So thank you for sharing those and these that I haven't heard.
Can you tell your dad if there is a particular one of those stories that has always really stuck in your memory?
Yeah, so, I said my school was desegregated and had always been. And so, I don't remember if you did share school stories, but just stories of church and home definitely stuck with me. And I think about I know the church we grew up in was multiracial.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize what an exception that was. And so I got to experience that and see how you created a safe place in a church home. But also our home. I hear on the news about all these people who say the N-word and then get in trouble by social media. And I was 5 years old when I found out that was a word you don't say, because we had African American people in our homes. Yeah. And so I found out sooner because our home life was integrated also. So it definitely impacted me in my childhood. And I think about my grandparents being a place of safety for children of different backgrounds, and I want my home to be that.
Yeah, and it is.
And so when we moved into our home in Nashville, we put up a basketball court, and I invited all the kids to come play at it, even though our son was 4 at the time, but there were teenage boys of different races in our neighborhood, and I made a point to tell them, you can come play. This is a safe place for you to play basketball on our driveway. And so I definitely have been intentional within my community that my home be a safe place for any child to be, and that my neighbors regularly see children of different races at our home, to the point that somebody asked me one time if we fostered, if we were foster parents. I was like, no, we're not. So I think it has helped. I want to be that safe haven in my community.
Your home is very much that, for sure.
And I do, my kids go to a school now that's 75% African American, and so
Yeah.
they're in the minority. But I pay attention. I think I notice the demographics of the schools that my children are in.
Yeah. Well, you've made some courageous choices yourself in that way.
It doesn't feel in comparison. But
Well, no, I think of when Kieran was the only white kid in his class. Remember you tell the story about finally some other, and my grandson is, he's not so short anymore, but at that point he was very short and very, very white.
yes,
Right.
blonde hair, blue eyes,
Yeah. So another white kid comes into the class, and all the black kids thought they were brothers.
Cousins. Is what they
Cousins.
said.
Oh,
They
that
were
was they were
cousins, yeah.
cousins. All right. I thought that was cute.
Yeah, but no, it's definitely, I would say, as I've become a parent and make choices for my kids' school here in a community where I have a lot of choices,
Yeah. That's good.
I definitely have that view. And now we have adopted, African American son.
Yeah.
And
You know,
so even
grandson.
when we go into a restaurant, I'm
Yeah.
very aware of how white the spaces we are in.
Yeah.
And so I do think your stories primed me for that to be something I am aware of. And my experiences in childhood where diversity was the norm. I'm really grateful for that too.
Good. I'm glad.
Because it is a gift.
Well, it's more than just a nice thing, Katie. I mean, I know you know this, but I always have felt like I'm very thankful because I think it makes me a better citizen of well, in every level, really. But not only that, I mean, you want your children to prosper. You want them to do well. And the world's a diverse place, and if I don't teach you to be comfortable with diversity and love it, really appreciate it more than just be comfortable, then it limits your scope, really, and your chance for success and chance to do well with people, to play well with others or whatever. But so I'm very thankful that that you guys, my kids, have you displayed. I mean, and it wasn't. I don't even know that we had conversations necessarily. Hey, this is right. This is wrong. I think it's just y'all just kind of picked up. Same with me. I don't remember mom and dad telling me, except treat all people alike. Treat people nice, whoever they are. And I think that's the key anyway. So I'm glad. I loved seeing how you and Lisa and Lucas grew up. Good people.
Can you tell Katie a little bit about where you think maybe that drive came from for your parents, and what it might have been like to
I could probably tell you more
hold
of
that to hold that line at the time that they were.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. My mom was from Mississippi, just a Southern lady, youngest of 13, so all spoiled, they said. They always said that. She was spoiled. She was a sweet lady. But anyway, Dad was from Kansas, which there were times that, all of this is complicated, really. And, we're not going to get into all the, but Dad was probably one of the few, if maybe he might have been the only Republican in Desegregation County back in the 60s, because it was, Democrat, it was Dixiecrat days. The Democrats ruled, but Dad was Republican. But I didn't realize what that meant, really. But so when we had the Republicans at that point were desegregationists, and the Democrats were segregationists. So they used to, I don't know, things were so different then. They used to joke about canceling each other's votes out or whatever, but, and it was lighthearted and fun. But so they came from two different backgrounds. But anyway, I think I have no idea really the price of it. I know at one point they got a lot of pressure at church, and I'm sure there were friends that said things. I don't know. But they were parents that, in those days, at least this is how they were. I wasn't as good at this as they were, but they were so protective of us. They didn't want us to hear anything negative or bad about anything to our detriment at times. So I really don't know.
Well, I did genealogy research.
Right.
Yeah,
so that leads into what Katie found later about Dad's family, which is very interesting.
Yeah. So your father's grandfather was an abolitionist, drove wagons on the Underground Railroad. His brothers were at the raid on Harper's Ferry. And I remember...
So wait, so my grandmother had uncles
Yes.
who were at Harper's Ferry with John Brown.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I remember you telling me a funny story about your mom calling her mother-in-law a Yankee.
Yeah.
Which always sounded funny to me. But as I learned more about their different backgrounds, that he came from abolitionists and not obscure ones.
Yeah.
And she was from Mississippi. And
Yeah, Mama.
what a mismatch that must have seemed. And for him to be right in the middle of, as you described, Jim Crow South, married to a woman who was raised in that. Mm-hmm. And then desegregation happens in his town. And I think all the time when I feel like misfit where I am, or I feel like what I want and believe isn't what the majority do, I think about him being right in the middle of that. And again, that safe haven, because he was the exception, he was able to create a safe place for other people who were an exception. And so, I didn't get any more stories than you did about what that was like for them, but
yeah, they were pretty closed mouthed.
I can imagine how hard it must have been to be the exception, but how powerful it was.
Yeah, that was interesting to find out that was a background in our family. Mm-hmm. It really was. So it sort of explained a lot about things to us, to all of us.
So the book where I found the story of Joseph Coppock, your grandfather, or my grandfather's grandfather, where I found the story where he was named in driving wagons on the Underground Railroad. In that same book, before they share about his story, they talk about some of the refugees from the South being up in Iowa and wanting to go to school and learn how to read so that they could go back and better able to bring their families up north also. And there was a big controversy of these grown African-American refugee men trying to go to this Quaker school, and some of the town was for it and some of the town was against it. And so anyway, the segregation, desegregation debate, being present there as well, and to see those themes throughout the history and in our own family history too.
Yeah, it makes me very proud of our family, but when I think about this struggle, this thing has been going on for a long time in our nation, and sometimes I wonder how much. When I left Southeast Arkansas, I thought, oh, it's settled. We've desegregated blacks and white people. Everybody's going to get along now. It's very naive, obviously. And only to now wonder if we've made any progress. I don't know.
Well, we've made progress in our family.
We have.
Yeah.
That's right.
Say that.
We have, absolutely.
And that's not a small thing.
I don't know. I heard John Lewis say we had made progress one time. If he says we can have what do I know?
Yeah.
You know.
But yeah, don't discount the impact of family generations.
Yeah.
You know, that's the powerful thing about parents that I appreciate from
Right.
you, and I try to steward well as a parent now myself, is the impact I can have on the generations under my care.
And you do a great job.
And moving forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't, if desegregation is the topic here mainly, I don't know. I think it has to, it's frustrating because you can't change people's hearts. You can't tell somebody they have to be open and love. I mean, you can tell them, but we can't control each other. But it would be nice to see that our law. I would be nice to see that our laws were more based on the right thing, rather than see that they get compromised a lot. I think too. I don't know. But I do see this, and this is, I guess, I think desegregation was important because I think any change when it comes to race, not just race, whatever it is, whether it's gender or sexual preference or whatever, your openness to the other only happens in a relationship, I think. I mean, that's for me, is true anyway. And if it hadn't been for relationships that sitting next to Dwight Clyde Washington in physics class or whatever, I wouldn't have learned and grown and changed and been open to other people so much. And so when I see white flight still taking place, it's not, people get to do what they want to do, but I think, again, you're narrow. You're making your children's choices narrow when we do that, and we don't claim diversity. I don't know. I really enjoyed learning about another culture that was 5 blocks down from my house. It was fun for me, and it was interesting, and the black guys were hilarious and fun and different, and I loved that. So I think it's a shame if people put their children in quote safe places where they don't run into different kinds of people. I think that's a shame, and I'm thankful that I got to grow up and experience the diversity. I'm very thankful about that.
Any last words for one another as we wrap up?
I'm proud of Katie and my other daughter, and my son was the same. They just have learned. They just love people and open. They're so open and easy. And I remember when Katie. Sorry.
Sorry, you're saying it to Katie.
You're saying it to me.
Yeah, I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you, and I'll never forget when they were having all the riots up in St. Louis. It was the start of Black Lives Matter. You remember that?
I do very, very well.
I, as an old white guy, I still have, and I will say this, and I've told you this, and I think it's true. If anybody says they're not racist, they're lying, because we all have we have to deal with it, and face it. But so as an old white guy, I was like, dang it, I wish they wouldn't riot. All those black guys, why are they rioting? It makes it worse. Well, you immediately knew that you took the stance of, hey, I understand what's going on, and you immediately sided with the Black Lives Matter movement from the start. And it forced me to open up to what that was about. I mean, and I promise you, I probably just would have gone on in my ignorance, but you helped me that way, and you helped me be more open and see the goodness of that movement. And it was because you understood as a mom of a black child immediately what they were facing and what they were demonstrating about. So that meant a lot to me. So it's come back to me through you. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I would just thank you for sharing stories. I mean, you are good at telling stories, but thank you for telling your stories. Because I do carry them with me, consciously and subconsciously.
Yeah.
But it's just really powerful to get more insight into where you're from and whose shoulders you're standing on. Yeah. And it's inspiring and instructive and humbling. So thank you for sharing your stories.
You're welcome. I love you.
Love you too.